first, you are going to show us how to do a perfect mitered binding that's sewn.
Okay, in the script it didn't say perfect.
Okay.
Okay, 'cause I'm going to do the best I can.
Okay, okay.
But this particular binding is the binding that I would recommend if you do not want to have any seams on the sides of your quilt.
Okay.
Okay. Now, not that there's anything wrong with that. I just really love seeing these 4 little mitered corners, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So,
And they're sewn mitered.
they are sewn mitered corners. So they're not the typical French fold where you have one long binding strip that goes all the way around. You're going to have 4 binding strips for each side of the quilt.
Okay, so
now,
if a quilt were 90 inches, then you just go the lengthways and cut it off, right?
yes, but you would probably want something in the neighborhood of 96 or 97 inches because you need a tail top and
Right.
bottom, okay?
Right.
And so what I've done today, and you could do this any width, you can adapt this for any width binding. I am taking a 3-inch strip for my binding, and I have folded it right sides together and pressed it. So it is a folded binding.
Right.
All right, doubled up.
That's my favorite.
All right, now on the quilt, the important thing is finding the right width for your seam allowance. So if you take and stitch, you say, well, I don't know what the seam allowance is. Ricky said I have to do something. Well, here's the test. Flip this over to the back side, and you will see your line of stitching running right across there. As you continue to fold this binding over, you want the fold to just barely exceed that stitching line.
Okay, but what if your quilt has star points that go all the way out to the edge? Then wouldn't you do a 1/4 inch?
Well, I would probably shrink this width down
All right.
so I don't have such a wide binding. So
Okay.
this one's going to be a little bit wide. And actually, I try to design quilts that don't have little, so what Alex is talking about is piecework seams that kiss the edge of the quilt. If you've got something like that, you're going to want a smaller binding than what I'm doing
All right.
now. But I try to avoid that in design if all possible. Okay?
Somebody wasn't born yesterday,
Yeah,
right?
because I don't want to chop those points off because I know the quilt police will come running.
Oh, they'll arrest you.
Yeah, they will. So now when I test this and I flip this over, this seam allowance is good because I pre-did it before the show, right? But if your binding goes too far past that seam, then your seam allowance is not big enough. And if it doesn't reach that stitching line, then your seam allowance is just too big and you're going to have to make an alteration there. So the seam allowance is whatever it is for the size of binding that you've got, and the test is to fold it around to the other side. The next thing is now that when you sew this on, and remember I did it as a basting first,
Right.
so that I could
To test it.
Now when I really want to do it, I need to start my stitching, whatever my seam allowance width is, I need to start that distance from the edge of the quilt. And rather than trying to measure that perfectly, what I do is fold at a 45-degree angle my binding so that right at the tip of the quilt, the 45-degree angle of the binding comes off, and I finger press that.
Okay.
Now, when I begin stitching, I will stitch on that crease, couple stitches forward, couple stitches back, and then sew the seam.
Great. I like that tip.
Okay?
Yes.
And when you get to the end, you're getting close to the end, do the same thing, fold the tail at a 45-degree angle, finger press it, and then open it up and finish stitching, stop right in the crease, and back stitch to secure. All right, now when it's time to do the next one, pivot. You'll start this seam the same way. Fold it back so that you can see that crease, fold it up, and stitch all the way down. Now, if you'll notice here, I'm going to see if we can get a good shot of this. Those are kissing right in the corner, okay? And that's important for this.
Well, my guess is that you don't want to overstitch. You want to just be able to see the background.
And I actually have maybe a 32nd of an inch separating right
Okay.
now, and that will not be a problem.
Nice.
So just a little bit will be fine. All right, now I'm going to do that on all 4 sides so that I have 2 tails at each corner of my quilt.
About how long?
You know, 3 to 4 inches.
All right.
2 inches is getting a little bit small, so 3 to 4 inches is pretty good. Now it's time to actually do the actual binding. And what I do is I turn this whole project upside down so that my binding strips are underneath. And this one, the one that's going vertical away from me, is just laying underneath. But the one that's coming toward me is folded out away from the quilt and toward me so that I could fold it up and over. All right, now here's where it gets a little interesting. Because this end is trying to fold, I want to go ahead and let it fold along the natural crease right there, and I'm going to use my iron, and I'm going to give that a really good press so that I can get a good crease on that area. See, I'm leaving the iron down there just a little bit longer than normal to give myself a good crease. Ouch, that was hot.
Don't try this at home, right?
Yeah. Well, do try it
Or
at least once or
with
twice.
parental supervision.
Right. Now, when I fold this up, normally I want this, remember the fold is
Right.
going just past the stitching line, so I'm going to fold this up just a teensy bit past the previous crease, and again, I'm going to press. This crease is even more important than the first one.
All right.
All right. So I'm going to let that crease in right in there, out there on the tail. Now, this is where it gets fun. Well, let me talk about this. This is the tool that makes it all happen. This is the binding miter tool. This is by Animus Quilt Publishing, which is
Jackie Robinson.
Jackie Robinson's company. We all love Jackie Robinson. And truly, Alex, this is not just a promotion. This is one of the tools that I cannot live without. This is in my sewing room all the time, and I do all of my borders this way, all of my bindings with this tool. So what's going to happen is you now take your two tails, and can you see how they're coming at an angle? I've
Yes.
got them sort of at an angle. I'm going to come into that corner and pinch right there at where those two seams have come together, and I'm going to pull the quilt up at a 45-degree angle. And I'm pinching that corner, and I bend it over so that both bindings are now laying horizontal in front of me. And as soon as I get it all laid out, everyone will be able to see that much easier. You see those
Perfect.
bindings are coming straight
Yes.
across in front of me,
Yes.
but the quilt is going up at a 45-degree angle. And you can see, here's my first crease, and here's the second one that I said was very important. And right here is the stitch where I started and stopped the corner. Those are the important things, because this miter tool allows me to lay this on here in such a way, I'm going to point with this again, so that the stitch is bumped up next to this angle. The edge of the ruler is parallel with my binding. The point of this ruler is coming right to that special crease and then off at an angle. And I wouldn't normally use a Sharpie marker to do this, but I want it to be visible today.
Like a pencil or something like that?
Yeah, and actually, I'm going to do my glasses.
Right.
This is so far now. Today, this is the most critical thing I've done, because I want it to be. You said I had to do it perfect a while ago.
No
So
pressure.
I'm doing. Yeah, no pressure. And I see the audiences out there. They're holding their breath. They're not.
Not like you,
they're not,
Ricky
They're not
Timms.
even moving right now. Okay.
And don't you wonder how Jackie came up with this?
You know, I just think it's brilliant. I really do. Now, this is easy to see. You can see
Yep.
that mark right there. And now, honestly, I would not mark it with a Sharpie marker. I would do it with just a regular pencil or something. And now when I pull this over, I was very careful to pull everything over so that it stayed in position. I'm going to put this into my machine. I'm going to lower my needle. I'm going to hand turn it right down into the spot where that line starts. I like to do a stitch forward, a stitch back, a stitch forward, a stitch back, and then continue on the line. I like to turn that corner sometimes with one little blunt stitch, because
Okay.
some people say it helps turn that point.
Really?
Yeah. You know, so since some people say it, I better do it.
Do you do everything I say, Ricky Timms?
Of course I do, Alex. I'm not stupid. And then on the line, and when I get to the edge, I will back stitch that just to secure that. All right, now it's time to trim. Get your pair of scissors and snip off a seam allowance, being very careful not to cut your quilt top.
More than a quarter inch, less than a
You
quarter
know
inch?
what? Once I get this cut, you'll see it's actually more at an angle, actually.
Okay.
And actually, I got a little stitch caught on the back side of this. but I don't think it's going to affect anything.
Well, that's why you
when
have a
I
seam
turn it.
ripper if you need to
Yeah.
release it.
All right, so actually I'm going to use that seam ripper. So there's my stitching. Okay, I'm going to take this point. You know what I'm going to do, Alex? I'm going to snip that off a little more blunt.
Okay.
So I don't have much bulk right at the corner. I'm going to fold this right sides together so that my corner opens up a bit.
Do you need the iron?
You know, it's not the iron, it's just because I got that little bit clipped on the inside.
Okay.
But I'm gonna, now that okay, I'm gonna hold that still. Oh, look, I got a critter. Did you see the critter?
I did see the critter.
We have critters in Levita. So I have opened that seam on the corner, and now it's time to turn it. So use a very special tool, something different than a needle seam ripper.
Like a porcupine
Yeah,
thing or something like
porcupine
that?
quill, something like that. And pull that over to the front side. Now, first of all, here's the back.
That's the front.
Oh, that is the front. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's the front.
You're under pressure here.
And here's the back. All right?
Beautiful.
And now you can just finish this off by stitching it down by hand the way you might normally do, with no seams anywhere along the side, but beautiful seamed miters in the corners of the quilt.
This is why you win the ribbons, Ricky Tim.
Well, the most important thing is no matter what you do, to do it well.
Right.
So I try.
What do you think?
That's a tough one.
Well, I have to say that I kind of was like going, "Ooh," but you really made it easy, Ricky.
Good.
Really, truly.
Just step by step, one step at a time.